Hello, my name is Kendall Grady, and welcome to Holistic Music Pedagogy, where I've been discussing my own approach to violin playing and teaching, which I copyrighted some time ago. Today I want to talk to you a little bit about memory, which I alluded to in my previous video on correlation and coordination. So what I want us to remember is that memory is not just an oral thing, but can be physical and visual as well. Many of us, when we practice, we think that if we practice it enough, we'll have a physical memory and we won't have to worry about it anymore. But then oftentimes something will happen in performance which causes our physical body to feel differently or respond differently, and therefore it feels like it's not as reliable, which can be quite a scary moment for us. But if we explore our music in visual ways as well as oral ways and sensational ways as well, using our senses, then we have a better shot of memorizing something more intactly. I also memorize what kind of thoughts I want to happen in my pieces and what kinds of emotions I want to be conveying, what kind of sounds I want to be hearing to convey those emotions. This helps from the previous practicing technique I talked about called interleaving, where I might separate a structure in the music between sections A, section B, and section C, and I'm exploring the way that they relate to one another. This can really help me plan out what thoughts I want to have specifically at what moment, and by that I mean yes, maybe memories of what I want to convey emotionally or like visually as if I'm telling a painting, telling a story, but also thoughts of, oh yeah, I have some shifts coming up, or oh yeah, I'm in whatever position. I also like to memorize backwards. And again, this comes from an idea of the interleaving strategy is instead of practicing everything 1, 2, 3, A, B, C, practice things coming from the back, especially if the back part of a piece, maybe it's that back section or the ending, the way something should end, we don't get to it a lot. Because if we're practicing it from the beginning all the time, then sometimes we don't get there because we stop and we focus on something else. An example of that in the Torque Violin Concerto, which I've been working on recently, is that the end of the second movement is very much like the beginning. And so in many ways, we feel like we don't need to practice it as much. But there's a section right before it which is quite slow and takes a lot of calculation with the bow and the bow usage, the amount of bow I'm going to be using, as well as my contact point and my pressure, which I could easily overlook for some of the more challenging parts in that piece. So instead of practicing the entire piece from beginning to end all the time, I might practice things backwards. I'll show you an example. That's actually the end of one of these sections. So I might practice that first and see if I'm really comfortable with it. Then I might go back even further. And add it in. And then I might back up all the way to where that passage, that section starts. This would be number A or number 1 in my approach into interleaving. And in that little practice time, I've actually practiced the ending of that area 3 times rather than starting everything from the beginning. Another way of memorizing something is by a type of practice I like to call burst practicing. And it's just these little areas, especially if something is very fast or very lively, these little moments of practicing something quite quickly to make it feel very comfortable in the body. I'll give you an example. Here's another passage in the Torque Violin Concerto Second Movement. If I find it at all awkward at first, perhaps I might play it very slowly. And work my way up to the point that it's actually faster than the way I need to go. So it feels very comfortable and loose in my body. And then I can go back and control it at the tempo that I want to play it at, or the tempo that feels comfortable with the rest of the orchestra. You can even isolate it even more than that. There's another passage further on, which is in double time. And say I find that very awkward or uncomfortable in the hand, I can burst practice even smaller chunks and add on to it. So in those moments, I'm learning how the little microcosms of the phrase or of the section works together and making it feel really comfortable and loose in my body. There's also the idea of reviewing a piece after having put it away for a little while, which we don't talk a lot about, but I find that our approach to the piece, our memory of the way that the piece goes, but also the memory of the way that the piece feels in our body and the way that we want to communicate it emotionally, also changes over time as we grow and we gain our own experiences as people and as musicians. So I think that there is an element of memory that is highly important, of memorizing something completely and being able to perform it from memory, but then putting it away and pulling it back out a little later to see how intact and how ingrained it was in our being. There's also the element that I think is very important of putting sections that you've isolated back into context. It's very easy for us to be practicing over a long period of time and isolating different sections. In the double time passage, which I started to play a little earlier, there's a lot of chords, triple stops and quadruple stops that you could separate and isolate if you so needed to. So I might isolate just that chord to make sure that it's perfectly in tune. But if I don't put it back into the passage, I actually don't understand the meter in which this passage is written, which almost feels like a 1. So what I'm trying to do is isolate technical moments that I might have to remember and say, oh, this is a tricky bit. I need to, play it like this, or I need to put it on in this contact point, etc. But at some point, that becomes ingrained in you, and it becomes part of the larger picture of the passage and of the piece. So you don't have to think about it so much so in detail. It becomes more organic and it feels easier in the body instead of having to micromanage everything. So I hope that some of those ideas in terms of memory help you on your approach to memory. There's many elements to it. Memorizing physical motions, memorizing the way it feels in the body, memorizing what you want to hear, whether that be your own playing or versions of the piece you're working on, and then, memorizing perhaps what you want to be thinking and what you want to be feeling at the time that you're playing specific areas in the piece. So until next time, keep your chops up, keep your hearts light, and I will see you soon. Bye bye.